Okay, so first things first, we're going to start by logging in to the online software. This webinar today is going to cover the online software. The desktop software functions in exactly the same way, so there's really no difference between the two. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and log in. Okay, so on the very first screen you'll see the count of the returns, the number ready to e-file, checks, print, appointments. If you click on any of these, it will actually bring up a list. So here's the message board. The message board will give you more information throughout the season. This will give you a daily return total. This is the number of returns that you've created every day. Over that window, you can see the e-file summary, the state e-file summary, the bank e-file summary. If you click the little I, you can actually view the details and get a list of those returns. So where we're going to start today, we're going to actually start in the setup section. So you click setup, and here you'll see a list of the preparers. So if you need to add a new preparer, this is where you would do it. You just click add new preparer. If you need to look and see when they've logged in, those kinds of things, all of that information is right here available to you. So to edit this information, you just click edit. You see all my return information. You want to make sure of a couple of things inside of this section. One, you want to make sure that the email address is good and valid. You will use this when you reset passwords, so that is particularly important. The other thing is this 5-digit PIN area will act as the signature on the forms 8878 and 8879. So you want to make sure that you enter that. Then you can do save and continue, and it'll take you over to the login security. Here's where you'll set the login security questions. It's an added layer of security. So we're going to choose a couple of questions here. And then you just click Save Changes. You'll see it's activated by admin. So this takes you to the security pass. So this is a two-step authentication. My recommendation is to go ahead and activate this. This adds an added layer of security to the account. So next on the list on the left-hand side here is firm. So we're going to look at the firm information. The only thing you really should be doing in here is just confirming that the information is correct. You want to make sure that the EIN and that the firm EFIN number is correct. If that's not correct, please contact customer support and we can help you through it. One other thing in the prepare section, in particular on the admin, I forgot to mention this. You do want to make sure that this PTIN is a correct number. If it's not a correct number, you will get an error when you try to transmit returns. Okay. So now we're going to look at settings. Settings. This is the prepare level settings, and then you have client level settings. So prepare level settings, you can exclude form fees, you can block the business tab for particular preparers. You can also set the preferences and then what happens in the view print. And if you want to copy this to more than one user, you want to select this here, and then in the left hand side here, select which users you want to assign this to. Now we're going to click on firm level. Firm level, this is where you'll start with the headers. So if you want to upload your logo, you can upload your logo here, and you can choose the positioning, whether it prints in the top left and the firm logo in the top right, or if the firm information prints in the top right and the firm logo in the top left. We're going to go to invoice information. This area is particularly important. You will not be able to process a return until you actually get this invoice information set up. Typically, I will use for the invoice number prefix, I will just use the location or the company name. So for us, like, we'll do STFS. Start an invoice sequence number. I tend to start it with the year. That's always my thing. And then I want to do Houston. I always recommend that you check this box here that says check here to show detailed fee disclosure for bank products. We save changes, you'll see all of that is saved. Now we can continue to the email configuration. So in the email account information, this is where you can choose what actually shows up in emails that you send to your clients. So you can have the tax return for signature information, you can change, you can have a letter for different ones, you can have client copies, you can set business, You can choose one for each business form as such, okay? Now we're going to continue the printer preferences. This is just basically saying, okay, what are we choosing when we print these out? Do we want to add watermarks? Do we want to include bank documents in the print? Do we want to include the mobile app instructions? The next thing that I touch on is the signature preferences. Just make sure that you have this section marked off for where you want the taxpayer signatures to actually show up. And then return stages. Return stages, you can modify these return stages any way you want to. These are just the most common. The next section here is going to be W-7 agent. If you are a W-7 agent, you want to make sure that you fill this information out. It'll process or take the processing time down on W-7 applications. Bank. Hopefully everyone has done this. If you haven't done this, please come in here, complete your bank enrollment. Mine is sitting here. You can just click view bank status, and then you can transmit, you can edit your enrollment, okay? If you need help with that, just reach out to customer support. We can walk you right through it. Sign pad. So here's where you have a couple of options. You want to set the firm signature. So you click start, and you can actually draw with your mouse, or if you're using one of the, if in the online you can draw with the mouse. If on the desktop, you can use the signature pad. Then you just want to save the signature for the firm signature. The firm signature needs to be the ERO's signature, not the preparer's signature. We'll start on the preparer. So you can save those. You see them there. The EIN DB. Now, if you want to add EINs, this will add throughout the year, but if you have some specifically at the start of the year, you can add those. IP security. This will typically, you want to use this to block out any preparers that don't need access maybe from a particular location. This is a security function. Generally speaking, I would say you probably won't be in this section unless you're talking to somebody in customer support. Support is our next section. And inside here, we have all the forms for 2017, 2015, the 8879s. These are all the forms. States, you can choose the states and actually get to the forms. We have the tax tables, so federal tax tables. We have the links. The links, this is where you're going to get the check print software when it becomes available. This is an important place to know for those of you that are going to be printing bank product checks. We also have IRS links and support links so that you can get information from there. Okay, now we're going to go back to the individual tab, and that's where we're going to focus on at this point. The next section here, so we've already talked about the dashboard, so we're going to look at the client manager. Okay, so the client manager shows here. Here's a list of the clients. If you want to open any client, you just double click to manage the actual return. This will give you a list of amended. This will give you a paper file list. This is going to give you a completed list, incomplete list. And if you need to file a prior year return for a particular client, you don't have to log into the prior year. The only reason you would log into the prior year is if you used us last year and want to check a status or something like that, or get copies of a return for the prior year. If you're creating a new one, this is the way that you would want to do this. You can edit and view from here as well, but this goes all the way back to 2010. So all you have to do is just click create new return, and it'll start that process. My tax office clients. So we're going to touch specifically on the tax office clients on Friday when we do the webinar on the mobile app. So hopefully everybody can join us for that, and we'll get into more information on at that point. Okay. So what we're going to start with is new return. So here in the new return, you're going to enter the taxpayer social. If they are applying for a W-7, you just check this box. Some customers have had requested us before it's to allow you to name the file. It is an optional field. Here's where you would select the return type. So in our case, we're just going to do a basic 1040. So hit save and continue. And here you'll see return's going to open right to the personal information. So we're going to fill out this information real quick. Date of birth. occupation. If they have an identity protection PIN, you can click there and enter that identity protection PIN for the taxpayer. For the spouse, that would go under the spouse section. So here, you want to answer the ACA questions. I know there is some questions about what's going to apply with ACA. At this point, we can only go off of what we know to be law and current law. The Republican tax bill will have no effect on any kind of training or anything like that until we have more information exactly what's in the bill and exactly how it impacts this current tax year. So in this particular case, we're just going to say yes. He didn't have health insurance through the marketplace, and they haven't received the 1099B or C or 1095B or C. We're going to select all modes. We're also just going to mark this person head of household. Spouse claimed as a dependent, spouse filed on another return. If you have to enter any of those checkboxes, they're right there and they'll load automatically. Next, we're going to go into the address information. There is a zip code database. It will load the city and state if you just enter the zip code. Some banks do require multiple phone numbers to be different, so it is something that you guys may want to have that information readily available when you start the return. If they're doing direct deposit, you'll just enter that information here. You'll enter the account type, the routing, if the account is outside of the US, if they want to use the same banking information for their state refund. So at this point, it's processing the information. It's going to start loading the return information that it needs. So you'll see now we have access to all the forms on the right side. You will not have access to these forms until you fill out the personal information sheet. It's just a process requirement. So in here, we're going to go to dependent information. Let's go ahead and add a new dependent. So you want to make sure that you choose the relationship to you. In this case, we're just going to say son. We'll say 1/3/2015. Okay, you want to make sure that you enter the dependent's SSN. If the dependent had an identity protection PIN, you would enter that on the dependent screen here. By default, it's going to say, yes, live more than 6 months in the year, 12 months. If that's not the case, then you just make sure that you mark those things. Mark that as the head of household qualifier, claim as a dependent, eligible for child tax credit, they're a U.S. citizen. If they're a full-time student or permanently disabled or kidnapped, you're going to enter, you'll just check that box here. If you have qualifying child care expenses for Form 2441, you can enter that on the dependent screen as well. And be sure that you do ask, that you do answer these initial EIC questions, and that you do ask the ACA questions. So we're going to save that dependent. We're going to start by adding a new form. So here's where we can go into add a new form. You can always type in the form in the search box, and it's going to give you a list. In our case, we're just going to add a W-2. So we're going to go ahead and add a new W-2. You'll enter that information inside here, the employer identification number, the employer name, the address, and again, zip code database is active on the W-2s. Then we're going to get down into the wages and tips. Before we get down into that section, I do want to point out a couple of things at the top here. One, if it's military wages, check that box. If it's the church employee income, not a minister, check that. If it's minister wages, check this box. But this is the key piece. The IRS has set verification codes on some W-2s in the last year or two. If your W-2 has a identification or a verification code rather, make sure that you enter that information here in the verification code section. If you don't, there's a likelihood that the return will be rejected for not having it. So we'll enter the wages, tips, and then also the federal income tax withheld. If they have anything in these boxes, again, you just want to make sure that you fill out the W-2 exactly as it appears. So now it's processing all the calculations, and what you're going to see here at this point now is that the total income, the deductions, taxable income, but you're going to see that all of this information has changed. So the total payments and the refund now is about $7,000. On the right-hand side over here, you have some IRS search functions, some useful links on the particular form. This will change and modify depending on the form that you're on. And then you have actual PDF copies of the return. So if I want to look at the 1040A, I can pull that up and you'll see just how it's going to appear. Now the other thing that you can look at is the filed forms page. The filed forms page will show you all of the forms that are currently attached to the return. For example, the Schedule 8812 is now on this return. Now we know this client qualifies for EIC just based on the fact that the Schedule EIC is here, plus we know. But let's say we thought we were done. So you click Verify, and it's going to come up and it's going to tell you that there's additional information needed. You can always click here to fix. So this one is saying that the taxpayer PIN information is missing. So we can click here to fix. It's going to take you over here. Now, if your taxpayer is letting you select the PIN, then you want to leave this at e-file using practitioner PIN. If they're choosing their own PIN, select it in here. Quite often, most often, clients are using the practitioner PIN. If they are, just click this auto generate tax PIN, check the box that says entered by ERO, and then set the signature date. If they are not going to e-file the return, check this box and it will load the appropriate forms, okay? So we're going to hit save here, and then we're going to go back and we're going to hit verify again, just to see where we are. So we hit verify and it says, okay, so additional information is needed. This is where we get to the ID information. There are some states that are requiring identification information. Key piece to this is you just want to make sure that they have an ID. A state issue or a driver's license in particular, if you can get that information, get it from them. If you're doing bank products in particular, it's a requirement for the most part. So we're going to say yes. We're going to choose a list. It's a state driver's license, state issued. We'll choose New Jersey. We're going to enter the number here. Okay, and if the state ID doesn't have an issue date, you check that box. If they don't have an expiration date, which some don't, you just want to go ahead and check that box as well. So we're going to choose 2029. There's additional information. Some states do have a PIN on the ID. You want to make sure that if it has a PIN, that you select that, okay? Taxpayer identity verification. If you did it in person, you just check yes, and then you're going to acknowledge that you did verify that it is valid. Okay. If you did it remotely, then you check yes and fill out those appropriate questions. So we're going to click save. Oops, gotta answer no. And up here, let's hit verify again. Now it tells us, okay, we have due diligence requirements on Form 8867. So let's click there and let's go take a look at the 8867. So we're going to click Add New. And you'll see up at the top, now it checks the boxes that are going to apply. So you want to go through and answer these questions appropriately. You want to make sure that you're able to attach an explanation in these sections. So you're going to type in what you asked, all of those things in those particular questions. You want to document any questions that you asked and then any response from the taxpayer as well. Okay, and then you get down and you want to do, this is specific to EIC. And then specific to child tax credit. You want to make sure that you answer number 12. You can fill all of this information as well. Just know that this section that you enter here will not be sent with the IRS. It's just for your records. You can generate this worksheet for a taxpayer signature. I recommend doing that. It's definitely going to help. So there's no more errors on this return. Now normally in this process following, during the normal, once software is actually live, you'll get the option then to complete the return. So what we're going to talk about here is you have the view print options up at the top now. When forms are released and available to print, then the listing shows here. You'll see all of these worksheets. You can email the return if it's set up. So if you choose customer copy, you can click email customer copy and that'll actually send an email to the customer with the documents. You can set the preparer, you can set signatures, you can choose or unchoose, you know, which forms you're actually working on. All right, and then next you can add notes. So you can go ahead and add notes into the return. Key piece here is turn on notes as a reminder. If you do this, when you open the return, you're going to get a notification that it is a reminder. You can always view it. You can always delete it at a later time. DM Docs, this is actually where you'll upload documents. So you can scan documents. I don't have a scanner plugged in at the particular moment, but you can also upload documents if they send them to you. Documents that they use in the mobile app, if they were to scan any documents, those would actually show up in DM Docs as well. Signature, you can send, select all, and you can send requests for signatures, or you can actually have them sign in the office. So that's all done. So now we're going to close the return. We're going to go back to the client manager window so that I can go over a couple of items that are actually inside here. So you'll get a reminder notice right here. This is what we had entered earlier. So when you go to the client, you're going to get a reminder notice as well right there. So up here at the top, you have edit, view print, which we've already looked at, view input, which is basically just going to give you a rundown of what information was entered into the return. You can delete the return. You can password protect the return. You can use the appointments and actually set an appointment for them. Here's where you'll see all the letters. So you have pre-season letters, you have mailing, scheduling letters, return status estimates, those kinds of things are all in here as well. Here's where you can, again, add notes, signature, and DM Docs, and we talked about all of those things already. Now the key piece now is down here in this client payment, and I purposely left this without us configuring the pricing because I wanted you guys to see it. It is off of here. It used to be under the setup, but it is under individual. So we're going to click this configure now button so we can set the pricing. So we're going to go to complete pricing setup. Now inside the pricing section, you have a couple of options. You can set it as a fixed rate for all returns. You can set it price per return, or you have the option to set the price manually after every return. The choice is yours. Most often what we see is a flat fixed rate or set prices per form. You can do the same thing for states. You can set the price for each state. You can set it manually. If you want to add discounts, you can go ahead and add those discounts in here. You can do discount for federal, discount for state. Just give it a description and the amount that you actually want to discount. You'll see I did military discount here, so that's already there. Additional charges, if you want to charge for additional services that you do and attach it to the tax return. For example, I did prior year return. You can add those here as well. So we're going to go back to our client and take a look now. Okay, now once we have the ability to mark the return complete, once we go live, then you'll get the option to click this button that says start payment. At that point, you'll go through the payment setup section, and I'm going to log into the prior year so that you guys can see that. So let's look at, let's look at this one. This is fine. Oh, we can't mark anything complete right now. Yikes. Can't mark it complete because it's electronic. Right now everything is shut down, so I can't mark anything complete. But you'll get the payment options. At that point, you'll check everything. That's where you're going to set the fee structure as well. You'll make sure that the bank product application is there. That's where you'll select their disbursement type, all of those things. So inside here, you can import clients from the prior year if you're using the online. Here's the estimator, so you can do a new quick estimator, enter in the information and get a refund total. Bank quick estimator, you can do that as well. You can see what the payment option is, what the refund amount is, what the tax prep fee is. And that'll give them this. And this is really quick, so if we just go you'll see that'll show the breakdown on all the fees, the transmitter fees, doc prep fees, those kinds of things, and you can print this out. And that gives them just a quick way to sort of know what they're looking at. This is the other one. You can do a married filing joint versus married filing separate comparison in here. We're going to touch back now on reports. Now you have a lot of options inside reports. You can create, build, customize any way that you want to, but there are a lot of reports already in here. So if you wanted to see, for example, let's look at a client summary. We can do view and print report. And here's a list, and it'll tell you if it's calculated, if the e-file has been through. And the key piece on any of these reports is you can actually click this button up here at the top, and it will launch Excel if you have Excel installed and export this information directly to it. And again, there are office revenue reports and custom reports. You can build these custom reports any way that you want. If you need help building a particular or custom report, customer support can always help you with that. Let's look at business. So you'll see very similar dashboard, very similar client profile as well. And you'll see these are all the business forms that we currently support. If you're going to create a new return, click create new return, and you can choose whether it's an amendment or 1120, regular. You do want to make sure that you set the pricing for business. It is a different pricing setup and pricing model. So you do want to make sure that you come back in here and you set these prices